teenage boy picked up a rock and hurled it at the sleeping figure beneath the overpass. "Hey, wake up, you bum." The old man didn't flinch. He didn't move. He simply opened one eye, studied the boy for exactly 3 seconds, then closed it again. That single look made 2 of the boys step backward without knowing why. But the loudest one, the one with the rock, mistook the old man's silence for weakness. He would learn within the hour that some men stay silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because what they've done speaks loud enough to echo through generations. If you believe every veteran deserves to be seen, comment on her right now. The man beneath the overpass had no name anyone remembered. The locals called him Ghost because he appeared and disappeared without pattern or explanation. He slept near the fence line of Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, always facing east, always with his back against concrete. His clothes were worn but clean. His beard was gray and trimmed short. His boots, though, were laced tight in a way that suggested habit rather than necessity. No one knew where he came from. No one asked. In a city full of transients, he was just another shadow that the comfortable chose not to see. What people did notice when they bothered to look was that he never begged. He never approached. He never spoke unless spoken to. And even then his words were few. He carried a small canvas bag that he never let leave his side, and he walked with a slight limp that became more pronounced in the rain. The teenagers from the nearby neighborhood had seen him before. They had thrown things before, and each time the old man simply absorbed their cruelty like stone absorbs weather, unchanged and unmoved. This particular afternoon the boys had grown bolder. There were 5 of them, ranging from 14 to 17, filled with that reckless energy that comes from boredom and the false courage of numbers. The leader, a 17-year-old named Derek, had decided that today they would make the old man react. He wanted a story to tell. He wanted to see fear. He picked up another rock, larger this time, and cocked his arm back. The old man sat up slowly. His movements were deliberate, almost mechanical, as if each motion had been practiced 10,000 times. He looked at Derek with eyes that held no anger, no fear, only a quiet assessment that made the air feel heavier. Derek hesitated. Something in those eyes reminded him of his grandfather's stories about men who had seen things that couldn't be unseen. But his friends were watching. He couldn't back down now. Before the rock could leave Derek's hand, a voice cut through the afternoon heat like a blade. "Drop it." Derek spun around to find 4 Marines standing 20 feet away, still in their flight suits, coffee cups in hand. They had been walking back from the hangar when they spotted the confrontation. The one who had spoken was a staff sergeant, mid-30s, with the kind of build that suggested he could end this situation in several unpleasant ways. Derek dropped the rock immediately. His friends were already backing away, their bravado evaporating like morning fog. "We were just messing around," Derek stammered. "He's just some homeless guy." The staff sergeant stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You throw rocks at people who can't fight back. That how your parents raised you?" Derek had no answer. He turned and ran, his friends scattering in different directions like startled birds. The Marines watched them go, then turned their attention to the old man. He had risen to his feet now, standing at an easy parade rest that seemed as natural to him as breathing. The youngest Marine, a lance corporal, barely 22, was the first to notice. "Sarge, look at his arms." The staff sergeant looked. The old man's sleeves had ridden up during the commotion, revealing faded tattoos that told a story in ink and scar tissue. An eagle globe and anchor on his left forearm rendered in the old style that hadn't been used since the 70s. A series of hash marks that indicated deployments far more than any normal career would accumulate. And on his right forearm, partially obscured by a long scar, a skull wearing a bush hat with the words "death" from above curved beneath it. The staff sergeant's posture changed immediately. He straightened almost imperceptibly, an unconscious sign of recognition. "Sir," he said, and the word carried weight. "You served." It wasn't a question. The old man looked at him for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Long time ago." His voice was rough from disuse, but beneath the gravel was something steady and calm. "Different world." The lance corporal stepped forward, curiosity overcoming protocol. "What was your MOS?" He asked it casually, almost as a joke, the way young Marines sometimes do when they encounter older veterans, testing to see if the old-timer actually knew the lingo or was just wearing the ink for show. The other Marines chuckled, expecting some vague answer, about being a supply clerk or a mechanic, something that would explain how this man had ended up beneath an overpass. The old man looked at the lance corporal with those assessing eyes. A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his weathered face. R317, he said quietly. The chuckling stopped. That MOS was not given lightly. It was earned through some of the most demanding training the Marine Corps offered, and it was carried by men who had done things that rarely made it into official reports. The staff sergeant studied the old man more carefully. Now, what unit? First Reconnaissance Battalion, then other assignments, things that didn't have names. The way he said it made clear that he wasn't exaggerating. The staff sergeant had heard that tone before from the old-timers at the VFW, who only talked about certain things after too many drinks, and even then only in fragments. The lance corporal, still young enough to be bold, asked the question that would change everything. Did you have a call sign? He asked it half joking, the way someone might ask about a nickname, not understanding the weight that call signs carried in certain communities. The old man was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Reaper Storm. The staff sergeant's coffee cup hit the ground. Hot liquid splashed across the concrete, but he didn't seem to notice. He stood frozen, staring at the old man as if he had just seen a ghost materialize from thin air. The other Marines looked at their sergeant, confused by his reaction. Sarge, one of them asked, you okay? The staff sergeant didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing backward through time to countless nights in his childhood, when his father, a Vietnam veteran himself, would tell stories after dinner. Most of those stories were about camaraderie and hardship, about friends lost and lessons learned. But there was one story his father told differently, with a kind of reverence that bordered on fear. It was the story of a sniper in Vietnam who had operated alone in the jungle for weeks at a time. A man who had accumulated a confirmed kill count so high that the official numbers were classified. The enemy had put a bounty on his head larger than any before or since. They called him the Reaper, because, wherever he went, death followed. And they called him Storm, because his attacks were as sudden and devastating as nature's wrath. The staff sergeant had always assumed it was legend. Every branch had its ghost stories, its tales of superhuman warriors who were more myth than man. Reaper Storm was the Marine Corps's boogeyman. The name that senior NCOs invoked when they wanted to describe what true excellence looked like, while simultaneously suggesting that no living person could actually achieve it. And now that legend was standing in front of him beneath an overpass, wearing worn clothes and carrying everything he owned in a small canvas bag. Sir, the staff sergeant said, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. My father served in Vietnam. He told me about you. He said you saved his platoon in Quezon. He said you spent 3 days in a spider hole picking off NVA officers one by one until they retreated. He said you walked out of that jungle covered in mud and blood, handed your rifle to the CO, and said they won't be coming back. The old man's expression shifted slightly. The first real emotion he had shown since the encounter began. It was not pride. It was something closer to sorrow. Your father, he said slowly. What was his name? Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, 2nd Battalion, 26 Marines. The old man closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were glistening. Little Mike, he used to share his rations with the village kids, even when we didn't have enough for ourselves. He had a picture of his girl in his helmet. He talked about the family he wanted to have someday. He paused. I'm glad he got to have it. The lance corporal and the other Marines stood in stunned silence. They were witnessing something rare. A connection across generations of service. A moment when the weight of history became tangible. The staff sergeant wiped his eyes quickly. Military bearing reasserting itself. Sir, with respect, what are you doing out here? There are programs, benefits. You serve this country in ways most people can't imagine. The old man shook his head slowly. I served. Then I came home. Coming home was harder than anything over there. The things I did, they kept me alive, but they followed me back. I tried the programs, tried the medications, tried the counseling. Some demons don't respond to treatment. He looked toward the base, toward the jets lined up on the tarmac in the distance. I stay here because the sounds help. The jets, the training, the routine. It reminds me of when things made sense, when there was a mission and a purpose and a clear enemy. Out here, I'm close enough to remember who I was. Far enough to not cause problems for who I am now." The staff sergeant was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that made the younger Marine's eyes widen. He came to attention and rendered a salute, crisp and perfect, the kind of salute reserved for generals and Medal of Honor recipients. "Staff Sergeant Torres," he said, his voice carrying the weight of everything his father had never been able to say. "It's an honor to meet you, Reaper Storm. My father lived because of you, which means I exist because of you." "Thank you." The old man studied the younger man's face, seeing echoes of a friend from another lifetime. Then slowly he returned the salute with a precision that hadn't faded despite the decades. "Your father was a good man. You carry his eyes. Make sure you carry his heart too." He lowered his hand. "Now get back to your duty station before someone notices you're late." The other Marines, following their sergeant's lead, snapped to attention and saluted as well. The Lance Corporal, who had asked the question that started this revelation, had tears streaming down his face that he made no effort to hide. They held the salute until the old man lowered his hand, then turned and walked back toward the base in silence, each of them processing what they had just experienced. Word spread through the base within hours. By nightfall, a procession of Marines had made their way to the overpass, some carrying food, others carrying sleeping bags, all carrying respect. The base commander himself came along with representatives from the VA and several veterans organizations. They offered the old man everything: housing, medical care, recognition he had been denied for decades. He accepted a hot meal and a new pair of boots. He declined the rest. "I've lived my life," he said simply. "Let me live what's left of it on my own terms." But he did accept one thing: the staff sergeant's phone number written on a piece of paper. "For when you're ready," Torres's son had said, "whenever that is, even if it's never." 3 months later, the old man used that number for the first and only time. He called to say goodbye. The cancer he had been ignoring had finally demanded acknowledgement. Staff Sergeant Torres was with him at the end, along with a dozen other Marines who had heard the story and wanted to pay their respects. Reaper Storm passed away at Zurdi 600 exactly at sunrise, surrounded by brothers who had never met him but who understood him completely. His real name, it turned out, was Thomas Walker. He had 3 silver stars, 2 bronze stars, a purple heart with 3 oak leaf clusters, and a Navy Cross that had been classified until 2015. He had no living family. He had never married. He had given everything to his country and asked for nothing in return. And when his country had failed him, he had simply faded into the shadows where he had always done his best work. The Marines of MCS Miramar buried him with full military honors, a ceremony that attracted veterans from across the country who'd heard the story of Reaper Storm and wanted to see the legend finally receive his due. The staff sergeant delivered the eulogy. "Some men serve their country," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "Some men sacrifice for it, and some men become the very definition of what it means to be a warrior." Thomas Walker was all 3. He never asked for recognition. He never sought glory. He simply did what needed to be done again and again until there was nothing left to give. And when he finally stopped, he did it quietly, the same way he did everything else. The Marines have a saying: "Once a Marine, always a Marine." Today we say goodbye to one of the finest Marines who ever lived. See, Reaper Storm, you've earned your rest. The base renamed the stretch of road near the overpass Walker's Way. A small memorial was erected, a simple stone with his name, his dates, and a single phrase: "He kept the faith." Every morning, Marines running their P-Troop pause at that stone and render a salute. Never judge a person by their circumstances. The man you overlook today might be the giant whose shadow you could never fill. Heroes don't announce themselves. They don't wear signs. They simply exist among us, waiting to be recognized by those wise enough to look beyond the surface. If this story moved you, if you believe that every veteran deserves dignity and every warrior deserves remembrance, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories that matter. The stories of those who gave everything and asked for nothing. The stories that remind us what honor truly means.